The emergency klaxons had been wailing for 72 hours straight aboard the Thunderstrike. Commander Daeho Kim rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the subspace communication array, watching the signal strength of the Caltharian. Distress call grow weaker by the hour. The coffee in his cup had gone cold long ago, but he couldn't bring himself to leave his post. "Commander, you need to get some sleep," said Lieutenant Haijin Park as she approached his station. Her normally pristine uniform was wrinkled from 3 days of continuous duty. "I can monitor the communications." Daeho shook his head, pointing. "At the flickering display, look at these readings, Haijin. The signal is getting weaker. That means fewer Caltharian ships are left to transmit. They're dying out there while we sit here and listen." The bridge of the Thunderstrike buzzed with activity despite the late hour. Technicians worked frantically to boost their long range sensors, trying to get a clearer picture of what was happening 1,200 light-years away. The Caltharian system had been under attack for weeks, but their distress signals had only reached Earth 3 days ago. "Sir, incoming transmission from the flagship," announced Communications Officer Young Ho Choi. "Admiral Cho wants all senior officers for an emergency briefing." Daeho stood up, his joints creaking from sitting too long. As he walked through the corridors of the massive destroyer, past dozens of crew members preparing for what everyone knew was coming. Weapons technicians loaded antimatter torpedoes. Engineers ran final diagnostics on the hyperspace drive. And Marines checked their assault gear. The bridge of the Soul's Fury was a cathedral of military technology. Holographic displays showed star charts, fleet positions, and most importantly, the tactical situation in the Caltharian system. Admiral Minesio Cho stood at the center of it all, her presence commanding respect from every officer present. "Gentlemen, ladies," she began, her voice cutting through the bridge chatter, "the situation has deteriorated. Our long-range probes confirm that the Caltharians now have only 14 ships remaining. The Ravagers have deployed over 300 vessels and are preparing for their final assault on Calthera Prime." Captain Tae Heinley stepped forward, holding a datapad. "Admiral, I've been monitoring Galactic Council communications. They've officially classified the Caltharian system as a total loss. No military intervention is authorized." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The Galactic Council, which claimed to protect peaceful civilizations, was abandoning an entire species to save their own fleets. "What about the other major powers?" asked Commander Ji-won Nam from the heavy cruiser Bizen's Pride, the Zentari Federation, the Hegemony. Taehyun's expression darkened. The Zentari claimed they're monitoring the situation. The Hegemony won't even respond to communications. Everyone's too scared of the Ravagers to act. Minesio clenched her fists. She had studied the Ravagers for years, ever since they first appeared in the Outer Rim territories. They weren't just conquerors, they were a plague. Biomechanical parasites that consumed entire worlds, stripping them of resources and technology before moving on to the next target. Worlds they attacked were left as barren husks, their populations either dead or converted into more Ravagers. "Admiral," interrupted Lieutenant So-Young Kim from the sensor station. "We're receiving another transmission from High Arbiter Veltar. It's pretty bad." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what appeared to be a damaged command center. Smoke filled the air, and sparks flew from damaged consoles. High Arbiter Veltar, leader of the Caltharian people, stood among the chaos. His forearms moved frantically as he coordinated the defense of his homeworld. "This is High Arbiter Veltar of Calthara Prime." His voice crackled through the static. "Our orbital defense platforms have been destroyed. The Ravagers are landing. Ground forces on our northern continent, our children, our cities." His voice broke. "If any civilization can hear this transmission, we beg you. We have broadcast to 47 different worlds, 47 different species. Please, someone, anyone, help our children survive what's coming." The transmission cut to static, leaving the human officers in stunned silence. They had all seen the intelligence reports about what happened to worlds conquered by the Ravagers. There were no survivors, no mercy, no hope. Minesia looked around at her officers. These were some of Earth's finest military minds, veterans of the colony wars and the AI rebellion. They had faced impossible odds before, but never anything like this, Admiral, said Commander Deho quietly. The Third Fleet is ready for immediate deployment. 800 ships, full combat load. We can be there in 18 hours. 800 ships against 300 Ravager vessels, mused Captain Tehine. The odds aren't terrible, but the Ravagers have been studying galactic military tactics. For decades, they know how every species fights. Menesio smiled grimly. That's their mistake, Captain. They've studied how every known species fights, but they've never faced humans in battle. She turned to face the tactical display showing her fleet. 800 vessels of various classes, from nimble destroyers to massive dreadnoughts. Each ship carried weapons and technology that had been forged in the crucible of Earth's brutal history of warfare. Signal all ships, she commanded. General quarters. All hands to battle stations. We're going to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten innocent civilians. Navigator Boramshin's fingers flew over her console. Hyperspace coordinates locked in, Admiral. All ships report ready for jump. As the final preparations were made, the Caltharian distress call continued to broadcast across subspace, growing weaker with each transmission. But for the first time in 3 days, it wasn't alone. 800 human warships prepared to tear through space-time itself, racing toward a battle that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The stars began to stretch into lines of light as humanity's greatest war fleet disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with them the hopes of a dying civilization and the promise that someone finally had answered their call for help. The Caltharian system looked like hell itself. Had opened up among the stars. 3 entire worlds that had once been paradise were now nothing but smoking rocks drifting in space. High Arbiter Veltar pressed his forehands against the reinforced glass of his command station, watching as massive bioships the size of mountains stripped away the last forests from Calthera Prime's surface. Sir, we've lost another defense platform, reported his tactical officer, mandibles clicking with stress. The young Caltharian's blue skin had turned pale with fear. Ow! The Ravagers are landing more ground forces near the capital city. Our people are trying to evacuate, but there's nowhere left to run. Veltar's heart sank as he watched the readings on his tactical display. 14 ships. That's all they had left from a proud fleet of over 200 vessels. The Ravagers had torn through their defenses like tissue paper, their biomechanical ships adapting to every weapon the Caltharians threw at them. Any word from the evacuation transports? He asked, though he already knew the answer. 7 civilian ships made it out of the atmosphere, his communications officer replied sadly, but the Ravagers are hunting them down one by one. They don't want anyone to escape. Now the view screen showed the horrifying sight of Ravager harvesting ships working across Calthara Prime's surface. These weren't just weapons of war, they were like massive living factories that consumed everything in their path. Trees, buildings, even the soil itself got sucked up and processed into raw materials for more Ravager ships. How long until they reach the underground shelters? Veltar asked. 6 hours? Maybe less, came the grim reply. The children are in the deepest bunkers, but once the Ravagers start drilling, ... Veltar didn't need to hear the rest. He had seen the reports from other worlds. The Ravagers didn't just kill, they absorbed living beings into their biomechanical collective, turning them into more soldiers for their endless war against all organic life. 47 worlds, he whispered to himself. We sent our distress call to 47 different civilizations. He had personally recorded messages to every major power in the galaxy. The Xantari Federation, with their advanced technology, the Hegemony, with their massive fleets, even the mysterious Voidwalkers, who claimed to protect the innocent. Not one had answered. Sir, the sensor operator's voice cracked with panic. I'm reading massive hyperspace distortions at the edge of the system. Something big is coming through. Veltar S. 4 eyes widened. The Ravagers had called for reinforcements. This was it, the final blow that would wipe his people from existence. How many ships? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I can't get an accurate count, the sensor operator stammered. The readings are off the scale. Dozens. No. Hundreds of contacts materializing. The main view screen erupted in brilliant flashes of light as hyperspace tiers opened across the system's edge. But these weren't the organic, twisted shapes of Ravager bioships. These were something else entirely sleek. Angular vessels that gleamed like polished metal in the starlight. Ship after ship materialized from hyperspace, forming precise battle formations with military precision that took Veltar's breath away. Each vessel was massive, easily twice the size of the Caltharian's old flagship. Weapon ports lined their hulls like the eyes of predators, and their designs spoke of one thing: war. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," his communications officer reported, his voice trembling with disbelief. It's not from the Ravagers." "Put it through," Veltar ordered, hardly daring to hope. The view screen flickered. And suddenly, he was looking at a face unlike any he had ever seen. The being had only two eyes, positioned close together on a narrow face. Her skin was pale and dark. Hair was pulled back in a tight military style. But it was her eyes that struck him cold, determined, and absolutely fearless. "This is Admiral Manesio Cho of the Earth Defense Force 3rd Fleet," she said, her voice cutting through the static like a blade. "We received your distress call." "Hi, Arbiter," Considerate answered. Veltar's translator worked frantically to process the unknown language, but the meaning was clear. Someone had come. After 47 unanswered calls for help, someone had actually come. "Earth," he managed to say, we've never heard of your species." "That's about to change," Admiral Cho replied grimly. Behind her, Veltar could see the bridge of her Vasilla hive of activity as dozens of these humans worked at control stations. "Captain Lee, deploy all fighter squadrons. I want a protective screen around every Caltharian civilian transport. Commander Kim, target the Ravager, harvesting ships first. Save as many people as you can." "Yes, Admiral," came the replies from her crew, their voices sharp and professional. Veltar watched in amazement as the human fleet spread out across the system with clockwork precision. These weren't the desperate movements of a fleet rushing into battle. This was the coordinated advance of a military machine that had done this before. Destroyer Squadron 7 moved to intercept the Ravager harvesting fleet. "Captain Taehyun," Lee commanded from his position on the bridge. "Use the plasma cannons, cook those bioships from the inside out. Cruiser Wing Alpha, I want you protecting those civilian transports. Nothing gets through." The massive human dreadnoughts moved forward like floating cities of death, their weapon systems charging with energy that made the very space around them shimmer. Veltar had never seen ships like these built not for exploration or trade, but for one purpose only: destroying enemies. On the other side of the system, the Ravagers were turning their attention from the dying Caltharian worlds to this new threat. Their bioships pulsed with organic energy as they prepared to face these unknown aliens. The Ravager hive mind was already analyzing the newcomers, preparing to add their technology to the collective. "Sir," Veltar's tactical officer whispered, "there are 800 human ships. 800. Most species don't have 50 vessels in their entire military." Admiral Cho's voice came through the speakers again, but this time she was addressing her own fleet. "All ships. This is the Admiral. The Ravagers have been terrorizing peaceful civilizations for too long. Today, we show them what happens when they threaten innocent lives. Today, we show them why you don't mess with Earth." The human fleet began to accelerate, their formation perfect, despite their massive numbers. Fightercraft poured from launch, bays like angry insects, forming protective clouds around the larger vessels. Energy weapons powered up, casting an eerie glow across the hulls of the warships. Veltar realized he was holding his breath. After days of watching his people die, after sending 47 unanswered calls for help, salvation had finally arrived. But could even these impressive humans stand against the Ravagers who had destroyed entire galactic civilizations? The bioships were moving now, their organic hulls rippling as they prepared for battle. The two fleets raced toward each other across the void, and Veltar knew that in the next few minutes, the fate of his entire species would be decided. The humans had answered his call. Now they would have to prove they could back up their promise. First exchange of weapons fire turned the darkness of space into a blazing light show that could be seen from the outer planets. Captain Du Haiyanbei gripped the command chair of the destroyer Soul's Hammer as massive Ravager bioships. Each one, twice the size of his vessel, came charging straight at his position. "Contact in 30 seconds, announced his tactical officer. "They're big, Captain. Really big." Du Haiyan studied the approaching enemy vessels on his main screen. The Ravager ships looked like something out of a nightmare part machine, part living creature with organic armor that pulsed like skin and weapon ports that opened and closed like hungry mouths. "Lieutenant Jinna Yu, target their neural clusters," he commanded, pointing at the bright spots along the enemy ship's hull. "Those are their brains. Cut the head off the snake." "Antimatter penetrators loaded and ready, sir," Gina replied, her hands steady on the weapons console despite the massive enemy ship bearing down on them. Fire. The Soul's Hammer unleashed a devastating barrage of antimatter, torpedoes that streaked across space like falling stars. The Ravager ship tried to dodge, its organic hull rippling as it changed direction. But human targeting systems had been designed to track Earth's fastest fighter jets. The torpedoes punched through the alien vessel's armor like bullets through paper. The bioship convulsed as its neural network was severed, its lights flickering and dying as the creature-machine hybrid lost control. It drifted helplessly through space, no longer a threat. "Direct hit," shouted the weapons officer. "That big ugly thing is dead in the water." Communications officer Sung Min Han looked up from his station with a confused expression. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Ravager fleet. They're demanding our surrender." The entire bridge crew burst into laughter. Du Haiyan shook his head in amazement. "These aliens don't know much about humans, do they? Tell them we have a counteroffer. What should I say, sir?" Du Haiyan's grin was cold as space itself. "Tell them humans don't surrender. We advance. We're about to show them why Earth conquered its own solar system before we even left home." Meanwhile, high above the planetary combat zone, Commander Yoon Ji-song was leading her fighter squadron through a deadly dance with Ravager drone ships. Fighter, the Soul Lightning, was a sleek, killing machine designed for one purpose: destroying everything in its path. "Fox Squadron, stay tight," she commanded through her radio. "These biodrones move like they're alive, but they think like machines. Can outsmart them." Lieutenant Hyenwoo Park, flying as her wingman, watched as a cluster of Ravager drones swept toward them in a perfect formation. "Commander, they're trying to surround us." "Let them," Yeonji replied, rolling her fighter into a spiraling dive. That would have killed most alien pilots from the G-forces alone. "Execute pattern Delta 7. Time to show these bugs how Earth pilots really fight." The human fighters scattered in what looked like panic, but it was actually a carefully planned maneuver. As the Ravager drones followed them, thinking they had the advantage, the human pilots suddenly reversed course and came at them from 6 different angles at once. Plasma fire lit up the void as the humans carved through the enemy formation with surgical precision. Each shot was perfectly aimed, each maneuver calculated to maximum effect. The Ravager drones, controlled by a collective mind that had conquered dozens of civilizations, couldn't understand how these individual pilots were outflying their coordinated attacks. "Scratch for more bogeys," Hanwoo reported as another Ravager drone exploded in a ball of fire. "These things fight like they've never faced real pilots before." "That's because they haven't," Yeonji replied, lining up another target. "Alien species don't have atmosphere flying. They go straight from ground to space." "But humans? We've been dogfighting in the sky for over a century. This is what we do." Back on the flagship Soul's Fury, Admiral Minesio watched the battle unfold on her tactical display with grim satisfaction. The human fleet was systematically tearing apart Ravager forces that had destroyed entire galactic civilizations. "Captain Lee," she called to her second-in-command, "deploy the kinetic bombardment platforms. It's time to end this." Taehyun looked up from his station. "Admiral, the kinetic platforms are designed for planetary bombardment. Using them against ships... We'll send a message to every Ravager in the galaxy," Minesio finished. "Do it." The massive human dreadnoughts opened their launch bays, revealing rows of tungsten rods, each the size of a telephone pole. These weren't explosive weapons, they were simple metal bars designed to be accelerated to incredible speeds. When something that heavy hit something else at a significant fraction of the speed of light, the result was devastating. Kinetic bombardment. Away, reported the weapons officer. Thousands of tungsten rods streaked across space toward the largest Ravager command ships. The alien vessels tried to intercept them with defensive fire, but the rods were too small and too fast. When they hit, explosions were so bright they could be seen from the outer planets of the Caltharian system. High Arbiter Veltar watched from his command station in complete amazement. The Ravagers had crushed his people's fleet of 200 ships without breaking a sweat. They had destroyed entire civilizations across the galaxy. But these humans were tearing them apart like they were built for nothing but war. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, "the human fleet is using tactics we've never seen before. They fight as individuals, but coordinate like a single mind. Each ship captain makes his own decisions, but they all work together perfectly." "Ow. Is that possible?" Veltar asked. His communications officer had been monitoring human transmissions. "Sir, I think I understand. Most alien species have central commanders who control everything. But the humans train every single officer to think, like a general. Every ship captain can make command decisions without waiting for orders." Veltar watched as a human cruiser, surrounded by 5 Ravager bioships, somehow managed to destroy 3 of them while escaping the trap entirely. The captain of that ship had made split-second decisions that saved his vessel and dealt massive damage to the enemy. They're not just fighting, he realized. They're thinking. Every single one of them is thinking like a warrior. A massive Ravager, biofortress, the size of a small moon, was trying to retreat toward the edge of the system. But human destroyers swarmed around it like angry wasps, hitting it with precise strikes that slowly crippled the massive vessel. "Sir," the human admiral's voice came through the speakers again, "your people are safe now. We're going to make sure every single Ravager in this system is destroyed. No one threatens innocent civilians while Earth stands watch." Veltar felt tears streaming down his face. After days of watching his people die, after 47 unanswered calls for help, these humans had not only responded, they were winning. Against impossible odds, against an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for decades, these warriors from a world called Earth were actually winning. The battle raged on, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Ravagers had finally met their match. Deep inside the massive biofortress Death's Harvest, the Ravager Hive Queen writhed in her organic command chamber. For 3,000 years, she had led her species across the galaxy, consuming entire civilizations without a single defeat. But now, as she watched her forces being systematically destroyed by these unknown humans, she felt something completely alien to her nature fear. The bio-neural networks that connected every Ravager ship screamed with reports of destruction. Ship after ship was being torn apart by weapons and tactics the collective mind had never encountered. These humans didn't fight like any species in the galactic database. They fought like predators, born for war. "Impossible," she hissed through her biomechanical throat. "No single species should possess such military capability. Our scouts surveyed this Earth decades ago. They were primitive, barely capable of spaceflight." Her tactical drones buzzed around the command chamber, projecting holographic displays. Of the battle, human ships moved with deadly precision, each captain making independent decisions that somehow coordinated perfectly with the entire fleet. It was like watching a pack of wolves hunt individual intelligence combined with pack instincts. "All remaining vessels," she commanded through the bio-neural link that connected every Ravager mind, "converge on the human flagship, eliminate their command structure. If we destroy their leader, their coordination will collapse." Ravager ships, each one a living nightmare of organic armor and biomechanical weapons, turned toward the Soul's Fury. The flagship was massive, but even it couldn't survive the concentrated assault of the entire remaining enemy fleet. Admiral Minesio Cho watched the tactical display as every surviving Ravager vessel abandoned their previous targets and came straight for her ship. Her bridge crew looked nervous, but she remained calm as death itself. Admiral, Captain Tae-hai and Lee reported. All enemy ships are converging on our position. They're trying to decapitate our command structure. Smart move, Minesio replied. Too bad for them that humans don't fight like other species. Signal all ships execute Protocol Thunderstorm. Tae-hoin's face went pale. Admiral, that protocol calls for... I know exactly what it calls for, Captain, she interrupted, and I know the cost. But sometimes you have to sacrifice the few to save the many. Send the order. Across the human fleet, every ship began receiving the same transmission. It wasn't just tactical data or new orders. It was something far more dangerous. Complete intelligence on Ravager weaknesses. The exact location of the Hive Queen's biofortress, and most importantly, authorization for any captain to make the ultimate sacrifice if necessary, Commander. Commander Daeho Kim read the orders on the bridge of his destroyer Thunderstrike and smiled grimly. His ship had taken massive damage in the previous engagement hull breaches on 3 decks. Main engines running at 60%, and life support failing in several sections. But his antimatter core was still intact, and his navigation systems still worked. Helm set collision course with the biofortress, he ordered calmly. All hands, abandon ship in 15 seconds. Navigator, Lieutenant Minjun Park, stared at him in shock. Sir, you'll be caught in the blast. The escape pods won't clear the explosion radius in time. Daeho looked around his bridge at the crew he had served with for 3 years. These people had followed him through the colony wars, the AI rebellion, and dozens of smaller conflicts. They trusted him completely. Someone has to guide her in, he said simply. The autopilot won't be accurate enough to hit the right spot. And if we miss this chance, that thing will escape to terrorize another world. Sir, let me stay, volunteered his weapons officer. You've got a family back on Earth. Daeho shook his head. This is my ship. My responsibility. Now get going. That's in order. One by one, his crew saluted and headed for the escape pods. Within seconds, the bridge was empty, except for Daeho and the hum of the failing life support systems. He opened a communication channel to the entire human fleet. This is Commander Kim of the Thunderstrike, he said, his voice steady and calm. For 3,000 years, the Ravagers have terrorized peaceful civilizations. Today, we show them that their reign of terror ends here. For humanity, for honor, for every innocent life they've taken. The Thunderstrike accelerated toward the massive biofortress, her damaged engines screaming as they pushed beyond their limits. Daeho's hands were steady on the controls as Ravager defensive fire erupted around his ship. Plasma bolts and biomissiles exploded all around him, but nothing could stop a man on a suicide mission. Antimatter core overload in 10 seconds, the ship's computer announced in its calm, artificial voice. Daeho smiled as he lined up his final approach. Through the view screen, he could see the Hive Queen's command chamber, a pulsing organic structure at the heart of the biofortress bullseye. See you in hell, he whispered. The Thunderstrike slammed into the biofortress at full speed, her antimatter core detonating on impact. The explosion was so massive, it cracked the kilometer-long vessel in half, sending biomechanical debris spinning through space like confetti. The Hive Queen's death scream echoed through every Ravager mind in the system. She had been the central intelligence that coordinated their species. Without her guiding presence, the bioneural network collapsed like a house of cards suddenly. Individual Ravager ships found themselves alone for the first time in their existence. No shared thoughts, no collective strategy, no hive mind to tell them what to do. Panic spread through their ranks like wildfire. She's dead, screamed the captain of a Ravager cruiser. The Hive Queen is dead. We're alone. Ships that had fought with perfect coordination moments before now fled in random directions, their crews overwhelmed by the sudden isolation. Some tried to retreat to the edge of the system, others attempted to hide behind asteroids, and a few simply shut down their engines and drifted helplessly through space. But Admiral Minesio wasn't finished. All units, she commanded, her voice cutting through the communication channels like a blade, pursue and destroy. No Ravager ship leaves this system alive. We end this threat permanently. The human fleet spread out like a pack of wolves, each ship group assigned to hunt down the fleeing enemies. There would be no mercy, no prisoners, no survivors to carry word of this defeat to other Ravager fleets. Captain So-Young-Bae, commanding the cruiser Inchin's Revenge, cornered 3 Ravager ships trying to escape through the asteroid belt. "This is for every world you've destroyed," she said as her weapons opened fire. High Arbiter Veltar watched from his command station as the humans systematically hunted down every remaining enemy vessel. These weren't just warriors, they were executioners, making sure that the Ravager threat to his people was eliminated forever. The battle was no longer a fight. It had become an extermination. 3 days after the battle, the Caltharian system looked completely different. Where once there had been chaos and destruction, now there was organized reconstruction. Human repair ships worked alongside Caltharian survivors, their crews sharing tools and techniques as they rebuilt what the Ravagers had. Destroyed High Arbiter Veltar stood on the observation deck of the Soul's Fury, watching a human engineering team install new defense platforms around his homeworld. The massive space station that would protect Calthera Prime was twice as powerful as anything his people had ever built, and the humans were giving it to them for free. "I still can't believe it," he whispered to himself, watching as human and Caltharian workers collaborated on the construction. 3 days ago, his people had been facing extinction. Now they were stronger than ever. Admiral Minesio Cho joined him at the observation window, her uniform still bearing scorch marks from the final battle. Dark circles under her eyes showed she hadn't slept much since the fighting ended, but her expression was peaceful as she watched the reconstruction efforts. "Your people saved us," Veltar said quietly, his 4 arms gesturing toward the bustling activity outside. "We had given up hope. Every species in the galaxy had written us off as dead, but you came anyway." Minesio nodded. Watching a human transport ship carefully deliver medical supplies to a Caltharian refugee camp on the planet's surface, "You called for help. That's all that mattered to us." "But I don't understand why," the alien leader said, turning to face her. "Your species gains nothing from this intervention. We have no rare resources you need, no strategic territory to offer, no advanced technology to trade. Why risk your lives for strangers?" The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, her eyes following a group of human medics as they worked alongside Caltharian doctors in a field hospital. Children from both species played together nearby, their laughter carrying across the communication channels. "On Earth, we have a saying," she finally replied. "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing." Couldn't do nothing while innocent people were being murdered. Veltar studied her face, trying to understand this strange species that had appeared from nowhere to save his people. Most civilizations in the galaxy fight only for profit or territory, but humans fight for ... principles. "Sometimes fighting is the only way to protect what matters," Minesio said simply. "And what matters most is making sure children get to grow up safe." News of humanity's intervention in the Caltharian system spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communication could carry it. Within hours, every major civilization knew that an unknown species had single-handedly destroyed a Ravager fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for decades. The Galactic Council, meeting in emergency session on Nexus Prime, was in complete panic. For centuries, they had dismissed Earth as a primitive backwater world, populated by violent barbarians who couldn't even leave their own solar system without fighting each other. "How is this possible?" demanded Chancellor Zixtel of the hegemony, his tentacles writhing with agitation. "Our intelligence reports said these humans barely had space travel capability." "Our reports were clearly wrong," replied Councillor Velthan of the Zentari Federation, her crystalline form flickering. "With nervous energy, no single species commands 800 warships. That's more vessels than most of us have in our entire military." Ambassador Ji-Hoon Kong stood before the assembled delegates, representing Earth for the first time in galactic politics. Was a career diplomat who had spent years preparing for this moment, but even he was surprised by the reaction his presence caused. "Honored delegates," he began, his voice calm and measured, "the Earth Federation comes before you today not as conquerors, but as protectors. We offer our military protection to any peaceful civilization threatened with extinction. The council chamber erupted in nervous chatter. Species that had ignored the Caltharian distress call were now terrified that these humans might hold grudges. "Do you want in return?" asked the Hegemony Chancellor suspiciously. "Territory. Resources. Tribute," Ji-hoon smiled. "We ask for nothing except the knowledge that innocent lives are safe from those who would harm them. Earth has no interest in empire building. We're only interested in making sure nobody else suffers what the Caltharians almost suffered." In the weeks following the announcement, 17 different species formally requested Earth's protection. The spiral arm colonies constantly threatened by pirates, the peaceful traders' union whose merchant fleets were regular targets for raiders. Even some of the minor powers who had previously looked down on humanity suddenly wanted human warships. Patrolling their borders, Captain Tae-Hein Lee, now promoted to admiral after his performance in the Caltharian battle, stood on the bridge of his new flagship, Bizen's Thunder, as reports flooded in from across human space. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "the Fourth Fleet is responding to a distress call from the Outer Rim. Pirates are attacking civilian transports. The Seventh Fleet just finished evacuating the Talar system," added his tactical officer. "Their sun went unstable, but we got everyone out in time." "And sir," his intelligence officer spoke up, "we're receiving formal alliance requests from 12 more species. They all want protection treaties with Earth." Tae-Hein nodded. Studying the galactic map on his main screen, red dots showed human fleets responding to emergencies across hundreds of light years. In just a few weeks, humanity had gone from unknown primitives to the galaxy's unofficial peacekeepers. "Signal all fleet commanders," he ordered, "remind them that we're not conquerors, we're guardians. Every life we save, every world we protect, proves that civilized beings can stand up to bullies and monsters." Back on Earth, President Kim Soo-jin addressed the Global Assembly, explaining humanity's new role in galactic affairs to representatives from every nation. "We didn't ask to become the galaxy's protectors," she said, looking out at the assembled delegates. "But when innocent people call for help, we answer. That's who we are as a species. That's who we've always been." The transformation of galactic politics was swift and dramatic. Species that had spent centuries hiding from threats like the Ravagers suddenly found themselves protected by human fleets. Trade routes that had been abandoned due to piracy were reopened under human escort. Entire civilizations that had lived in fear now slept peacefully, knowing that Earth's warriors stood watch. The Ravagers, once the galaxy's most feared predators, were now extinct. Other predatory species looked at the wreckage of their biofleets and decided to find easier targets in distant galaxies. The age of terror was ending, replaced by an age of protection. High Arbiter, now serving as Earth's first alien ambassador, often stood in his office looking out at the rebuilt Calthera Prime. Human and Caltharian children played together in the parks below, their parents working side by side to build a better future. Humanity had found its purpose among the stars, not as conquerors seeking empire, but as guardians standing between civilization and chaos. They were the ones who answered when others called for help, who fought not for profit, but for principle, who proved that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is protect those who cannot protect themselves. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly how humanity wanted it. The end.